Imagine looking up at some of the world's most rugged, towering mountain ranges, the kind of peaks that seem to scrape the sky itself. It is easy to assume these places have always been empty, silent, and untouched by human history. But what if you were told that these breathtaking heights were once home to thriving civilizations, their stories carved into cliffs and hidden along high-altitude passes, waiting to be rediscovered? This is not a legend. This is the true story of human ambition written in stone and sky. For generations, we have underestimated the courage and creativity of our ancestors, often picturing ancient peoples as bound by the limitations of their environments. Yet scattered across the globe, from the Andes to the Himalayas, lie the remains of communities that did more than just survive at dizzying elevations. They built complex societies, forged trade routes through inhospitable terrain, and created cultures rich with spiritual meaning, all while living where thin air and steep slopes defined daily life. These were places of refuge, innovation, and connection. They were strongholds against invaders, sacred sites aligned with the stars, and hubs of exchange that linked distant worlds. Each settlement tells a unique story of adaptation, but together they form a much larger narrative, one that challenges and expands our understanding of what humans can achieve. Today, we are going to uncover 26 of these extraordinary places. We will explore how they flourished against all odds and why their secrets have remained hidden for so long. This is a journey into the clouds, a chance to walk in the footsteps of those who looked at a mountain and saw not a barrier but a home. So settle in and prepare to see human history from an entirely new perspective, one that rises high above the ordinary and rewrites the story of who we are and where we have dared to go. Picture that lone traveler standing at the edge of a vast plain, their eyes lifted not in dread but with a spark of possibility. The mountain ahead was not a wall to stop them, it was a door to a new beginning. This was the perspective of countless ancient peoples. They saw in the soaring peaks and treacherous passes a unique combination of advantages that simply could not be found on the flatlands below. First and foremost, a mountain was the ultimate natural fortress. Its steep slopes and narrow passages acted as a built-in defense system, a geological moat that could deter even the most determined invaders. A small community, positioned correctly on a high pass, could control movement through an entire valley, holding a strategic advantage that was both powerful and permanent. This wasn't just about hiding, it was about controlling the flow of people, goods, and information. The same narrow trail that was difficult for a farmer's cart was a perfect place to collect taxes from wealthy merchant caravans or to monitor the movement of armies. It was a position of immense economic and military power, carved by nature and mastered by human ambition. Yet the appeal went far beyond simple security and commerce. For cultures across the globe, the highest points on Earth were intrinsically sacred. They were seen as the dwelling places of deities, the pillars holding up the sky, the points where the mundane world met the divine. To build a settlement on a mountain was to live closer to the gods, to participate in the sacredness of the cosmos. The thin air and breathtaking vistas naturally inspired awe and reverence, making these locations perfect for spiritual observation, ritual, and pilgrimage. The effort required to build and live there was itself an act of devotion, a testament to the settlers' faith and determination. This powerful trio of motivations, security, economy, and spirituality created an irresistible allure. It fueled a drive to innovate, to solve the immense problems of survival in such a demanding environment. the geographical challenge became a catalyst for civilizational strength, pushing communities to develop advanced agriculture, ingenious architecture, and complex social structures. These were not people who were forced into the mountains as a last resort. They were pioneers who chose the heights, seeing in those rocky slopes a promise of safety, prosperity, and a connection to something far greater than themselves. They looked up and saw home. Picture a cluster of stone houses clinging to a cliffside, connected by narrow paths that weave through mist-shrouded valleys. This is the very heart of what we mean by a high-altitude pass settlement. It is a world away from a simple village on a plain. Imagine the difference between a house built on a calm, open field and one constructed on the very crest of a storm-swept wave. That is the level of intentionality and ingenuity we are talking about here. These communities were not accidents of geography or the last resort of a fleeing people. They were deliberate, strategic, and brilliantly planned endeavors. Their location was everything. Settlements were almost always positioned at a choke point, a natural bottleneck along a critical trade artery. Think of the ancient Silk Road, where caravans laden with silk and spices had to navigate through a single mountain pass, or the Inca trail system, where suspension bridges crossed dizzying gorges. Controlling that point meant controlling the wealth that flowed through it. A small community on a high pass could levy taxes on wealthy merchant trains, monitor the movement of armies, and become an indispensable hub of information and commerce. They were the gatekeepers of continents. To survive in such an environment, every aspect of life had to be engineered for resilience. The architecture was a masterpiece of adaptation. Homes were built with thick stone walls to retain heat during frigid nights and to withstand howling winds. Roof lines were often sloped to manage heavy snowfall. But the true genius extended beyond the dwellings themselves. They mastered the art of terraced farming, carving the steep mountainsides into grand, stair-like gardens. This technique prevented soil erosion and created microclimates where a variety of crops could be grown in succession, from potatoes at higher elevations to maize further down. Water, the most precious resource, was managed with astonishing sophistication. They constructed intricate networks of canals and aqueducts to channel glacial meltwater directly to their fields and homes, often over great distances and with precise gradients. These were not just villages, they were feats of hydrological engineering. Communal structures were also central to their design. A single, well-defended granary might serve the entire community, protecting the season's harvest. Shared ceremonial plazas or sun temples reinforced social bonds that were absolutely essential for survival in such an isolated and demanding place. Ultimately, life in these rarefied air demanded a profound and intimate knowledge of the local ecosystem. The people who lived there were not just residents, they were expert naturalists. They understood the seasonal migration patterns of animals for hunting, the precise timing for planting and harvest based on subtle changes in the weather, and how to manage their limited resources with a long-term vision that sustained generations. This deep connection to their environment created a unique cultural identity, a fingerprint found nowhere else. They were microcosms of human innovation, where every single day was a test of adaptability, and their very existence stands as a powerful testament to our species' ability to not just endure, but to truly flourish against all odds. Uncovering these sky-high settlements is a detective story where the first clues often come from the heavens themselves. Modern archaeology no longer relies solely on adventurous souls stumbling upon a forgotten wall. Instead, the search begins in the quiet hum of a laboratory, with scientists scanning satellite imagery. These powerful cameras orbiting our planet can detect subtle variations in vegetation growth, revealing the ghostly outlines of buried structures hidden for centuries beneath dense forest canopies or layers of earth. But the real game-changer is a technology called LIDAR, which stands for Light Detection and Ranging. Imagine a special sensor mounted on an airplane or a drone, firing millions of laser pulses at the ground below. These pulses pierce through the smallest gaps in the leaves and trees, bouncing off the solid ground and any hidden structures, returning to the sensor to create an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional map of the surface below. It is like magically stripping away an entire forest with the push of a button, revealing the ancient footprints of roads, plazas, and building foundations that are completely invisible to the naked eye. This technology has revolutionized our understanding, turning entire mountain ranges into new areas of exploration overnight and showing us that these so-called isolated settlements were often part of vast, interconnected networks. Once these tantalizing clues are mapped from the air, the meticulous work on the ground can begin. Teams of archaeologists embark on expeditions to these remote sites, often facing the same harsh conditions the original inhabitants endured. Their work is slow and deliberate, more like surgery than digging. They use small trowels, brushes, and even dental tools to carefully remove soil, grain by grain, documenting the exact position of every artifact they find. A simple pottery shard is not just a piece of broken clay, it is a data point. Its style can indicate trade connections with distant cultures, while residues inside can be analyzed to discover what food or drink it once held. A discarded stone tool can show us the cutting techniques and the types of materials, from wood to animal hide, that were being worked, and when human remains are found, they offer the most intimate connection to the past. Analysis of bones and teeth can reveal a person's diet, their general health, common illnesses, and even where they were born, telling stories of individual lives and large-scale migration patterns. To weave these individual clues into a coherent story, scientists employ a stunning array of analytical techniques. The most famous is perhaps radiocarbon dating. Everything that was once alive, from a charred piece of wood in a hearth to a single seed found in a storage pit, contains a radioactive form of carbon. This carbon decays at a very steady, predictable rate after the organism dies. By measuring how much is left, scientists can determine with remarkable precision when that plant was harvested or that tree was cut down, providing a solid timeline for the settlement's occupation. Another field, called paleobotany, focuses on the ancient plant life. By studying preserved pollen grains, known as palynology, or analyzing phytoliths, which are microscopic silica structures found in plants, researchers can reconstruct the entire agricultural system. They can identify exactly which crops were grown in those ingenious terraces, what weeds plagued the farmers, and how the surrounding forest was managed, painting a vivid picture of their sophisticated environmental mastery. Beyond the settlement itself, researchers look to the very environment to understand the challenges these people faced. They drill deep into glaciers to extract ice cores, long cylinders of ancient ice that act like a frozen history book. Each layer of ice captures tiny bubbles of the atmosphere and particles from the air from a specific year, allowing scientists to reconstruct past climate conditions, from periods of terrible droughts to eras of abundant rainfall. Similarly, by examining sediment layers in nearby lake beds, they can see evidence of earthquakes, landslides, or volcanic eruptions that would have directly impacted the people living on these unstable slopes. This multidisciplinary approach, combining space-age technology with painstaking fieldwork and laboratory science, is what truly brings these lost worlds back to life. It transforms a scattered collection of stones and bones into a coherent narrative, allowing us to hear the faint whispers of the past and finally understand the resilient, innovative and sophisticated societies that once dared to make these dizzying heights their home. While the world rightly marvels at the iconic beauty of Machu Picchu, the true story of Inca mastery over the Andes unfolds in the countless lesser-known settlements hidden within the same breathtaking range. One such place is Choquequirao, a site so remote and challenging to reach that it has earned the evocative nickname, the Sister City in the Clouds. Perched dramatically on a high ridge overlooking the roaring Apurimac River, this settlement is a testament to the Inca desire to inhabit even the most formidable landscapes. Its very name translates to cradle of gold, hinting at both its perceived sacredness and its potential wealth. What makes Choquequirao so extraordinary is its architectural mirroring of its more famous counterpart. Here, visitors find the same signature Inca genius for shaping the land itself. Vast, intricate agricultural terraces cascade down the steep mountainsides, each one a carefully engineered platform that created fertile soil where none naturally existed. These were not just farms, they were feats of civil engineering designed to control erosion, manage water runoff from mountain rains, and maximize sun exposure for crops like maize and potatoes that could thrive in the thin air. Alongside these functional marvels stand ceremonial platforms and meticulously constructed stone buildings, their trapezoidal doorways and polished walls echoing the sacred geometry found at Machu Picchu. The remote location of this city sparks fascinating debates about its original purpose. Some archaeologists propose it was a final refuge, a last bastion for Inca nobility and priests fleeing the advancing Spanish conquest, a place so difficult to access it could be kept secret and defended. Others see it as a vital strategic administrative center, a crucial node in the vast and complex Inca road network that connected their empire. From this high vantage point, officials could control movement through the valley, manage trade and tribute from surrounding regions, and project imperial power into otherwise untamed territory. Its position was not one of isolation, but of deliberate connection within a larger system. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Choquequirao is its seamless integration with the mountain itself. The Inca did not simply build on the land, they built with it. The settlement's layout follows the natural contours of the ridge, with structures and plazas flowing over the topography rather than fighting against it. This demonstrates a profound respect for the natural world, a philosophy where the mountain was not an obstacle to be conquered, but a living entity to be harmonized with. Every stone wall, every terrace feels like a natural extension of the peak, a partnership between human ingenuity and geological form. Ongoing excavations continue to peel back layers of mystery at Choquequirao. With each season, new sections of the city are reclaimed from the dense cloud forest that has shrouded it for centuries, revealing more about daily life, religious practices, and its economic role. These discoveries consistently show that the Inca Empire's reach was not limited to a few spectacular sites. It was a civilization that intentionally and successfully extended its influence into the most inaccessible corners of its domain. Proving their mastery over the high-altitude environment was not an accident, but a deliberate and widespread strategy that rewrites our understanding of what ancient societies were capable of achieving. Far to the north, in the range shadow of the Annapurna and Dhaulagiri massifs, lies a realm where the very rock seems to breathe with history. The Mustang region of Nepal presents a landscape of stark, wind-sculpted canyons and towering cliffs the color of rust and sand. And etched into these impossible faces, sometimes hundreds of feet above the valley floor, are the entrances to thousands of caves. This is not a random scattering of hollows, but the remnants of a vast, multi-level metropolis suspended in the sky. To envision it, you must picture not isolated grottos, but an entire vertical city, a honeycomb of human endeavor carved with immense effort into the heart of the mountain itself. The sheer scale of this construction defies easy explanation. The caves are not all on one level, they are stacked in tiers, creating a vertiginous architectural puzzle. Some chambers served as simple family dwellings, with soot-blackened ceilings and niches carved for storage. Others were designed as ornate Buddhist sanctuaries, their walls once covered in vibrant murals depicting deities and mandalas. Deeper within the complex, archaeologists have uncovered caves used as burial chambers, where carefully arranged human remains and funerary artifacts speak of complex spiritual beliefs and rituals surrounding death. This was a fully functioning society with distinct zones for living, worshipping, and honoring the departed, all contained within a labyrinth of stone. The question of access is one of the site's most enduring mysteries. How did people reach their sky-high homes? The most plausible answer lies in a network of rope ladders, wooden stairways, and perhaps even intricate scaffolding that could be withdrawn for defense. Imagine the daily lives of these people, hauling water, food, and supplies up these precarious pathways, their children learning to navigate the dizzying heights from a young age. This inaccessibility was their greatest security, a natural fortress that would have been nearly impossible for any hostile force to assault, giving the community a profound sense of safety and isolation high above the world. That very isolation became the site's greatest preserver. The high-altitude air of Mustang is exceptionally dry, creating a natural time capsule within the caves. This arid environment acted like a museum's climate-controlled vault, protecting organic materials that would have decayed anywhere else. Explorers and archaeologists have discovered an incredible array of artifacts perfectly conserved for centuries. Among the most significant finds are ancient manuscripts, some written in now rare scripts containing Buddhist texts, historical accounts, and philosophical treatises. Exquisitely detailed Thangka paintings on cloth and murals directly on the cave walls have retained their stunning pigments, offering a vibrant window into the rich spiritual and artistic life that flourished here. This discovery fundamentally challenges the long-held perception of the ancient Himalayas as a domain solely of nomadic herders. The Mustang Caves provide undeniable evidence of a settled, sophisticated, and highly organized society. They were not just surviving, they were thriving, developing a complex culture deeply intertwined with the trans-Himalayan trade routes that snaked through the valleys below. This civilization acted as a crucial intermediary, facilitating the movement of goods, ideas, and people between the Tibetan plateau and the Indian subcontinent. They built a unique cultural identity, blending influences from both north and south into something entirely their own, a testament to human adaptability and the drive to create community and meaning, even in the most breathtaking and isolated landscapes on Earth. Now we journey from the soaring cliffs of Nepal to a landscape of a different kind of drama, the Bandiagara Escarpment in Mali. This is not a range of peaked mountains, but a vast, sheer sandstone cliff that erupts from the flat Sahelian plains, stretching for over 150 kilometers. It creates a stark, dramatic dividing line across the Earth, and for centuries, its vertical face has been home to one of the most ingenious architectural achievements in human history. The cliffs themselves provided a canvas and a fortress, used first by the ancient Telam people and later by the Dogon, who continue to inhabit the region today. Their collective story is one of resilience painted onto a rock face. The dwellings here are not merely built against the cliff, they are an integral part of it. Structures of sun-baked mud brick seem to grow organically from the rock, clinging to the sheer surface and tucked into natural caverns. The primary motivation for this vertiginous lifestyle was undoubtedly defense. Perched high above the plains, these communities were virtually impregnable to the armies and raiders that crossed the savannah, but the advantages extended beyond security. The elevation offered a strategic escape from the intense heat of the lowlands, catching cooler breezes and providing a natural refuge from the diseases that plagued more humid, lower altitudes. It was a deliberate and brilliant strategy for survival in a challenging environment. Perhaps one of the most fascinating clues left by the original Telem inhabitants is their physical presence. Analysis of their remains reveals they were a people of remarkably small stature. This was not a simple curiosity, but a profound biological adaptation. Their smaller, lighter bodies were perfectly suited for the life they led, allowing them to navigate narrow, treacherous cliffside paths and scale rocky outcrops with an agility that would have been impossible for larger individuals. They literally evolved to fit their environment, a powerful testament to the pressures of high-altitude living. Their architecture mirrored this adaptation, featuring compact, multi-story granaries perched on rocky promontories, designed to protect their vital food stores from both pests and invaders. This complex of cliff dwellings fundamentally challenges a narrow, outdated view of African history. For too long, the narrative of advanced civilization on the continent was often confined to places like Egypt or the Nile Valley. Bandiagara forces us to look elsewhere, to the interior, and to recognize the incredible innovation that flourished in what might seem like a forgotten corner of the world. The Telem, and later the Dogon, who adopted and adapted their architectural legacy, demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of engineering, social organization, and environmental science. They created a society that was not just surviving, but thriving through a deep, symbiotic relationship with their dramatic and demanding home, writing a powerful and often overlooked chapter in the global story of human high-altitude achievement. Now we journey east to a place where the roof of the world meets the ancient pulse of global commerce. High in the jagged embrace of the Pamir Mountains, a stony fortress rises from a high valley, a sentinel watching over one of history's most consequential intersections. This is Tashkurgan, a name that translates fittingly to stone fortress, and for over 2 millennia, it was far more than just a stronghold. It was a vital heart, pumping the lifeblood of trade and culture along the sprawling network of routes we now call the Silk Road. Its very existence is a testament to a simple, powerful truth. Remoteness does not mean irrelevance. In fact, for a trading post, being positioned at a strategic choke point in a breathtakingly harsh landscape was the ultimate advantage. Imagine the scene centuries ago. A caravan of weary Bactrian camels, their double humps laden with bolts of silk, sacks of spices, and blocks of jade, crests a high pass. Below them lies the sanctuary of Tashkurgan, its formidable stone walls promising safety, rest, and opportunity. For travelers who had braved the brutal climate and bandit-infested trails of the Pamirs, this valley was an oasis of civilization. But it was not just a pit stop, it was a mandatory customs house, a bustling marketplace, and a cultural exchange center all rolled into one. Controlled Tashkurgan, and you controlled the flow of goods between the immense empires of China, the sprawling khanates of Central Asia, and the rich kingdoms of the Indian subcontinent. The fortress was not just defending a town, it was guarding a gateway. Within those protective walls, a unique social tapestry was woven. The local Tajik people, whose ancestors had long inhabited these high valleys, formed the persistent thread in this fabric, but they were constantly joined by a shifting array of other cultures. Sogdian merchants from Samarkand might be haggling with Han Chinese officials over tariffs. Tibetan traders could be exchanging news with Persian scholars. In the bustling markets, the air would be thick with a dozen languages, the scent of exotic spices, and the palpable energy of deal-making. This constant interaction forged a distinctive local culture, one that absorbed linguistic nuances, artistic styles, and technological innovations from every direction. A child growing up in Tashkurgan would have been a true citizen of the ancient world, exposed to ideas from Rome to Chang'an. The most profound evidence of this cultural melting pot isn't found in market ledgers or travelogues, but in the very spirituality of the place. Archaeological excavations in the area have uncovered the remains of ancient Zoroastrian fire temples, where followers of one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions would have tended sacred flames. Not far away, the foundations of Buddhist stupas speak to a community of monks and pilgrims who carried their faith along these high mountain routes. This coexistence of diverse religious structures points to a remarkable level of tolerance and syncretism. Tashkurgan was not merely a place where goods were traded. It was a crucible where beliefs mingled and philosophies were exchanged, proving that intellectual and spiritual commerce was just as valuable as the material kind. This high-altitude pass wasn't on the edge of the world, it was at the very center of it. Now we travel from the high deserts of China to the lush, volcanic highlands of Indonesia, where a very different kind of mountain mystery is rewriting the timeline of human civilization itself. On a hilltop shrouded in mist and controversy in West Java, the site of Gunung Padang challenges everything we think we know about the ancient world. At first glance, it looks like a series of weathered, moss-covered stone terraces scattered across a serene hill, but look closer and the questions begin. Why are these stones arranged with such geometric precision? Why does the entire structure resonate at a specific frequency? And most baffling of all, what if this isn't just a hill, but something far, far older hidden beneath it? This is not a tale of a forgotten city, but of a potentially forgotten epoch. Some researchers, using ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography, propose that Gunung Padang is not simply built on a natural hill. They suggest the entire hill is the structure, a massive, multi-layered pyramid constructed by human hands over many millennia. The deepest layers, according to core samples, could date back an astonishing 20,000 years or more, a time when much of the world was still locked in an ice age. If these controversial dates are even remotely accurate, Gunung Padang would stand as arguably the oldest known megalithic site on the planet, predating Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid of Giza by thousands upon thousands of years. The implications of such an age are staggering. It would mean a sophisticated society, capable of complex construction and deep astronomical understanding, was thriving in Southeast Asia long before such achievements were thought possible. The builders would have possessed advanced knowledge of stoneworking, architecture, and perhaps even geomancy, the art of aligning structures with the natural energies of the earth. The precise positioning of its massive andesite columns, some weighing several tons, suggests a deliberate celestial connection. Certain alignments correspond with the solstices and equinoxes, turning the entire site into a giant stone calendar, a place where ancient priests could track the passage of the seasons and the movements of the heavens from their high-altitude perch. Of course, such radical claims are met with intense skepticism from many mainstream archaeologists. They argue the evidence for a human-made pyramid is inconclusive and that the dating methods are flawed, suggesting the site is a natural volcanic formation that was later modified by humans into terraces around 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. This scientific debate is fierce and ongoing, a classic clash between established paradigms and bold, new evidence. But regardless of which timeline ultimately proves correct, the sacred nature of Gunung Padang is undeniable. Its name even translates to Mountain of Enlightenment, and local Sundanese people have long revered it as a place of spiritual power and ancestral connection. Whether an ancient pyramid from a lost age or a spectacularly engineered ceremonial complex, Gunung Padang's power lies in its enduring mystery. It forces us to look at the map of ancient human achievement and ask what else we might have missed. It suggests that the drive to build monumental, spiritually significant structures on high ground is a fundamental human impulse that appeared across the globe, from the Andes to Indonesia, independent of one another. This hilltop in Java is a powerful reminder that the peaks and ridges of our world have been silent witnesses to human ingenuity for far longer than our history books have ever dared to dream. Long before the Inca Empire cast its shadow across the Andes, a remarkable culture known as the Chachapoya carved their civilization from the clouds. They called themselves the Warriors of the Cloud, a name that perfectly captures their ethereal homeland and formidable spirit. Their greatest achievement, the fortress city of Kuelap, stands as a breathtaking testament to their ingenuity, perched on a ridge high above the Utcubamba Valley like a stone crown upon the mountain. To reach it, one must ascend into the mist, a journey that feels less like travel and more like a passage into another world, a world these people mastered completely. The first sight of Kuelap is utterly staggering. Encircling the entire settlement are colossal walls of pale limestone, soaring as high as 60 feet in some sections. These are not mere barriers, they are statements of power and permanence, constructed with such precision that the massive stones fit together seamlessly without mortar. Imagine being an approaching traveler centuries ago, gazing up at this impregnable bastion looming through the fog. It was a display of sheer defensive genius, a natural fortress made utterly unconquerable by human hand. The main entrance itself is a masterclass in military architecture, a narrow corridor that funnels any potential attacker into a vulnerable choke point, easily defended from above. But Kuelap is far more than just a fortress. Once you pass through those mighty walls, an entire city reveals itself. The interior is a labyrinth of over 400 circular stone buildings, their unique rounded shapes distinguishing them sharply from the rectangular architecture of later Inca sites. Many of these structures are adorned with intricate symbolic friezes, patterns of zigzags, diamonds, and eyes carved into the stone. These are not random decorations, they are the cultural fingerprint of the Chachapoya, a distinct artistic language that speaks of a complex society with its own beliefs and aesthetic values. The most prominent structures, like the massive El Tintero building which resembles an inverted cone, suggest a deep ceremonial purpose, a place where rituals were performed to connect with the gods of their mist-shrouded realm. The strategic location of Kuelap tells a story of savvy economics as much as defense. From its vantage point at an elevation of nearly 10,000 feet, the Chachapoya exerted control over a critical nexus of trade routes connecting the resource-rich Amazonian jungle below with the highland Andes above. They became the vital middlemen, facilitating the exchange of exotic feathers, spices, and medicinal plants from the lowlands for precious metals, alpaca wool, and other highland goods. This economic power, combined with their formidable defenses, allowed their culture to flourish in splendid isolation for centuries, developing a unique identity independent of the coastal and highland civilizations that surrounded them. This fierce independence ultimately defined their final chapter. When the expanding Inca Empire finally reached their territory in the 15th century, the Chachapoya did not submit quietly. They became famous for their prolonged and fierce resistance, earning their warrior moniker in a desperate struggle against an overwhelming force. Historical accounts suggest that even after an eventual Inca conquest, the Chachapoya never truly assimilated, their cultural pride simmering beneath the surface. This resistance adds a crucial, often overlooked layer to the history of pre-Columbian South America, a narrative not of passive conquest but of resilient defiance. Kuelap, therefore, is more than just ruins. It is a lasting monument to a people who chose to build their masterpiece in the sky, fiercely defending their way of life until the very clouds themselves seemed to rally to their cause. The discovery of Ötzi the Iceman was a moment that froze time, offering us a perfectly preserved window into the life of a man who trekked the high Alps over 5,000 years ago. But his lonely fate on a mountain pass begs a much larger question. He was not a solitary wanderer, so where was he coming from and where was he going? The answer is rewriting our understanding of early Alpine life, pointing to a network of sophisticated seasonal settlements and even permanent villages nestled in the sheltered valleys and high passes of the region. These were not just temporary camps for hunters, but the homes of resilient communities who had mastered the art of living in a vertical world. These mountain dwellers were brilliant innovators, crafting a toolkit perfectly adapted to their environment. They did not use generic tools, but developed highly specialized equipment for the challenges they faced. Their arsenals included finely pressure-flaked arrowheads for hunting ibex and chamois, polished stone axes made from prized jadate for woodworking, and sharp sickle blades for harvesting the tough grains that could grow in the thin soils. Every item served a precise purpose for survival, from processing animal hides for warm clothing to crafting the wooden structures that gave them shelter from the brutal winds. These objects, often lost or discarded and later revealed by melting ice patches, tell a story of a people who were not struggling to survive, but were thriving through intelligent adaptation. Their entire way of life was dictated by a rhythmic dance with the seasons, a practice known as transhumance. As the deep snows of winter receded, these communities would ascend from their more protected winter villages in the lower valleys, driving their livestock up to the lush, high-altitude alpine meadows. There, they would establish summer settlements, taking full advantage of the short but abundant growing season. When autumn's chill returned, they would reverse their journey, moving back down to their permanent homes. This wasn't a nomadic wandering, it was a highly organized and efficient cycle that maximized the resources of different ecological zones, a testament to their deep, generational knowledge of the mountain's rhythms. The incredible preservation power of the alpine ice has given us intimate details about their daily existence that are usually lost to decay. We know what Ötzi wore, a layered outfit of grass cloak, leather leggings, and bearskin cap. We know what he carried in his medicine kit, a probiotic fungus to treat stomach ailments. We even know his last meal, a hearty portion of dried ibex meat and einkorn wheat. These findings suggest his community possessed not just practical survival skills, but a complex understanding of nutrition, herbal medicine, and textile production. They were processing materials, planning meals, and treating illnesses with a sophistication that rivals many settled agricultural societies of their time. This evidence collectively paints a picture of a people who were in a profound and symbiotic relationship with their mountain home. They were not merely visitors passing through a harsh landscape, but active participants in its ecosystem. Their seasonal movements helped shape the alpine pastures, while their hunting practices managed wildlife populations. The mountains, in turn, provided them with everything they needed, from raw materials for their tools to spiritual inspiration hinted at by certain artifacts. They were as much a part of the alpine world as the rock and ice, their lives a continuous conversation with the heights, a dialogue that we are only just beginning to understand. Rising from the plains of central Greece like something from a divine dream, the stone pillars of Meteora present perhaps the most audacious architectural statement ever made in the name of faith. This is not a settlement born from defense or trade, but from an unwavering pursuit of spiritual purity. Beginning in the 14th century, hermit monks began ascending these colossal natural rock towers, seeking a solitude so absolute it would bring them closer to God. Their ambition was not just to live in the clouds, but to build a new world there, one prayer at a time. The initial ascent was a perilous act of devotion itself, achieved by scaling rickety, lashed-together ladders or being hauled up in nets by ropes, a journey that literally placed their lives in the hands of their brothers and their faith. This was a deliberate rejection of earthly accessibility, a physical manifestation of their withdrawal from the worldly concerns below. What they constructed on those dizzying summits were not simple hermit caves, but entire self-sustaining micro-cities dedicated to worship and community. Each monastery was a complex ecosystem perched in the sky. They painstakingly built reservoirs to capture rainwater and carved gardens from the rock to grow their own food. Within the fortified walls, workshops hummed with the creation of icons, incense, and manuscripts, while scriptoriums and libraries became repositories of sacred knowledge and ancient texts, preserving culture through times of immense turmoil below. These were not just places to pray, but to live, work, study, and create, all in an environment designed to minimize any distraction from their spiritual purpose. The daily rhythm of life was a continuous loop of labor and liturgy, each action an offering. The very architecture of these sky-bound sanctuaries tells a story of ingenious adaptation. The structures were built with locally quarried stone, their design blending seamlessly with the natural rock formations to withstand the fierce winds that whip across the peaks. The Great Meteora Monastery, the largest of them all, features a stunning frescoed chapel and a cavernous refectory with a long wooden table where the monks would gather for silent meals. The Varlam Monastery still houses the massive original net and rope winch, a testament to the sheer logistical feat of construction, where every beam, every stone, every book had to be painstakingly lifted hundreds of feet into the air. This was an engineering marvel driven not by conquest or commerce, but by a collective and profound spiritual yearning. The existence of Meteora fundamentally changes our understanding of what a high-altitude settlement can represent. While other communities sought safety for their bodies or control over trade routes, the monks of Meteora sought safety for their souls, building a fortress against spiritual decay. Their refuge was not from invading armies, but from the temptations and conflicts of the secular world. They turned the mountains into a sanctuary of the spirit, proving that the human drive to ascend is not always about material gain, but can be a profound search for meaning, a literal elevation towards the divine. Their enduring legacy, with 6 monasteries still active today, continues to inspire awe, a permanent reminder that faith can indeed move mountains, or in this case, build breathtaking civilizations upon them. High on the windswept plains of the Bolivian Altiplano, where the air is thin and the sun beats down with an intense, unforgiving light, the stone ghosts of Tiwanaku stand as a monument to one of history's most astonishing acts of defiance. This was not a city built in a hospitable valley or a protective canyon. It was a deliberate proclamation of power, erected at a breathtaking altitude of over 12,000 feet beside the deep blue expanse of Lake Titicaca. For centuries, this pre-Incan civilization did not merely survive in an environment that would cripple most societies. They mastered it, transforming what appeared to be a barren, high-altitude desert into the heart of a vast spiritual and political empire. Their success forces us to abandon our preconceived notions of where great cities can arise, proving that human ingenuity can bloom in the most unlikely and demanding of soils. The foundation of Tiwanaku's incredible success was an agricultural revolution that turned limitation into abundance. The key to their survival was a brilliant system known as raised field agriculture, or suka kolas. Imagine a grid of long, rectangular planting beds elevated above the cold ground, with canals of water flowing between them. This was not a simple farming technique. It was a complex feat of environmental engineering. The water in the canals absorbed heat from the strong Andean sun during the day, releasing it slowly throughout the frigid nights to create a protective microclimate around the crops, effectively shielding them from frost. The nutrient-rich muck dredged from these canals was then used to fertilize the raised beds, creating an incredibly productive cycle. This system allowed them to grow massive surpluses of potatoes, quinoa, and other hardy crops, supporting an urban population that would have been unimaginable without such innovation. Their food security became the bedrock of their power, enabling them to support not just farmers, but artisans, priests, and rulers. With their basic needs not just met but exceeded, the people of Tiwanaku could channel their collective energy into creating a capital of profound spiritual and architectural significance. The city's layout was a grand cosmological diagram, a physical representation of their world, etched into the earth and stone. At its heart stands the Akapana, a massive stepped pyramid believed to represent a sacred mountain, its base aligned perfectly with the cardinal directions. Nearby, the Kalasasaya enclosure is a vast ceremonial platform where priests would have observed the heavens with meticulous care. Its famous Gateway of the Sun, a single block of andesite intricately carved with a central deity often called the staff god, is a masterpiece of stonework and a celestial calendar, its alignments marking the solstices and equinoxes with stunning precision. The stone-cutting techniques displayed here are a mystery that continues to baffle engineers, with blocks fitting together with such exactness that not even a razor blade can slide between them, all achieved without the use of iron tools or the wheel. The influence of this high-altitude capital rippled outwards for hundreds of miles, creating a cultural sphere that dominated the southern Andes for centuries. Tiwanaku was not an isolated marvel. It was the radiant core of a vast network connected by trade, religion, and ideology. Their distinct artistic style, featuring powerful symbols like the staff god and the iconic stepped cross motif, appears on pottery and textiles found from the Pacific coast to the tropical lowlands. They established colonies in distant ecological zones to secure access to a wider variety of resources, from coca leaves to exotic feathers, all funneling back to the spiritual center on the Altiplano. This reach demonstrates that Tiwanaku was a true empire of ideas, its authority stemming not from brute military force alone, but from its perceived role as the center of the universe, a place where the earthly and divine realms met. Its eventual decline, long before the rise of the Inca, remains shrouded in mystery, likely a combination of prolonged drought and social upheaval. Yet its legacy is undeniable, a powerful testament to a civilization that looked at one of the most challenging landscapes on Earth and saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity to build a heaven in the cloud. While Tiwanaku's empire was forged in the high Andes, another form of high-altitude mastery was unfolding on the opposite side of the globe, where the fate of entire civilizations hinged on the control of a single precious resource, water. Imagine the shimmering mirage of an oasis city, a splash of vibrant green and life in a vast, unforgiving sea of sand. This was Khotan, a legendary jewel on the southern branch of the Silk Road, famous for its jade and magnificent carpets. But its survival, and indeed the flow of trade across continents, did not depend on the city alone. Its true lifeline was a hidden network of fortified outposts perched precariously in the barren mountain passes that served as gateways to the Tarim Basin. These sentinel settlements were the unsung guardians of the Silk Road, the vigilant eyes watching over the pulse of global exchange. Life in these high-altitude stations was a constant exercise in resilience and observation. They were not large cities, but rather tightly knit communities of soldiers, opportunistic traders, and deeply spiritual monks, all drawn to this crossroads of the world. From their rocky perches, they could monitor the slow-moving caravans of camels winding through the valleys below, their cargoes of silk, spices, glass, and ideas representing the wealth of empires. A glint of sunlight on armor or an unusually large cloud of dust could signal either a lucrative trade mission or an approaching band of raiders, and it was the duty of these lookouts to know the difference. Their existence created a fragile bubble of security in one of the most lawless and perilous terrains on Earth, making them absolutely indispensable to the Silk Road's operation. This created a remarkable social experiment, a miniature world where cultures and faiths colluded and coexisted out of sheer necessity. Within the stone walls of a single pass outpost, one could find a Tibetan Buddhist monk copying sutras, a Nestorian Christian merchant from Persia negotiating the price of incense, and a local god whose ancestors had worshipped the mountains themselves, all sharing water and conversation. Islam, too, would later add its voice to this spiritual symphony. These were not just way stations for goods, but for ideologies. A new artistic technique developed in Afghanistan could be discussed here before being carried east to China, while a philosophical concept from India could find its way west to the Mediterranean. The harsh environment acted as a great equalizer, forcing a pragmatic tolerance that allowed these diverse beliefs to meet and mingle without the immediate conflict that often plagued the richer, more powerful cities of the lowlands. None of this would have been possible without a technological triumph that rivaled the grandeur of any temple, a hidden network of underground canals known as the Kharez system. In a landscape where surface water quickly evaporated or seeped into the thirsty sand, survival meant tapping the water at its source, the melting snowpacks of the high mountains. The Kharez was a breathtaking feat of ancient engineering, a gently sloping tunnel dug deep into the earth to tap into a mountain aquifer, sometimes stretching for miles to deliver a reliable, year-round flow of water to the settlement and any fields below. Maintenance shafts were dug at intervals, giving the landscape a peculiar pockmarked appearance. This was a community's entire reason for being, and its maintenance was a sacred duty. The knowledge to build and care for these systems was passed down through generations, a specialized skill set that meant the difference between life and desiccation. It was this invisible infrastructure, hidden beneath the stark beauty of the desert, that truly allowed the Silk Road to flourish, proving that the greatest human achievements are often the ones we cannot see. 13 stone towers stand in silent procession along a desert ridge in Peru, a stark and mysterious skyline against the barren hills. This is Chankillo, and while it lacks the dwellings of a typical village, it represents something perhaps even more profound, the intellectual and spiritual capital of an entire culture. Built 2,300 years ago by the Khazma Sechin people, this complex is recognized as the oldest known solar observatory in all of the Americas, a sophisticated machine built of rock and light. Its purpose was breathtakingly precise, to track the passage of the sun across the sky with an accuracy that governed every aspect of life, from when to plant crops to when to honor the gods. The entire layout functions like a giant stone calendar. From specific observation points to the east and west of the ridge, a priest or astronomer could watch the sun rise or set directly over a particular tower, marking a specific date in the solar year with unerring certainty. The solstices, equinoxes, and every day in between could be pinpointed, turning the chaotic flow of time into a predictable, manageable rhythm. Choosing this specific barren hilltop was a deliberate act of genius. In the flat coastal plains below, the horizon would have been obscured, but here on this high, clear perch, the celestial dome was laid out in its entirety, an unobstructed view of the heavens. This location transforms our understanding of why ancient peoples ascended to such heights. It was not always for defense or trade, but sometimes for pure knowledge. Chankillo was a university without walls, a laboratory where the first scientists of the Americas decoded the fundamental cycles of the universe. The priests who operated this observatory held immense power. Their authority derived not from military strength, but from their perceived ability to communicate with the celestial forces and predict the seasons. They could tell their people the exact day the days would begin to grow longer again after the winter solstice, a promise of returning life and warmth that must have seemed like divine magic. This knowledge was the bedrock of their society, enabling efficient agriculture, organizing religious festivals, and legitimizing the rule of the elite, all based on a profound understanding of astronomy. The true wonder of Chankillo lies in its seamless fusion of the practical and the sacred. This was not merely a scientific instrument, it was a temple to the sun. The ceremonies held here, timed to the precise movements observed from the towers, would have reinforced the cosmic order and the leadership's role within it. The sun's journey across the towers provided a public, undeniable spectacle of the priests' connection to the divine, a continuous reinforcement of their social and religious authority. This intricate blend of astronomy, agriculture, and statecraft reveals a level of intellectual achievement we are only beginning to appreciate. It shows us that ancient high-altitude sites could serve as centers of learning and spiritual gravity, places where humanity reached for the stars to better understand its place on Earth, proving that the drive to comprehend the cosmos is a timeless and elevation-defying human pursuit. High on a wind-swept plateau in western Tibet, where the earth meets an impossibly vast sky, the ruins of the Guge kingdom tell a story of faith and power etched into the very stone of the mountain. Founded in the 10th century by a descendant of the last king of the Tibetan Empire, Guge was born from a desire to preserve and revitalize Buddhism during a dark period of persecution. For 7 centuries, this wasn't just a remote outpost, it was a brilliant flame of culture, a beacon of spiritual and artistic achievement in one of the most formidable landscapes on the planet. The kingdom's capital, Trans-Saharan, was its crowning glory, a labyrinthine city carved directly into the soft sandstone of a towering pinnacle. Imagine approaching this citadel, seeing its whitewashed temples and red-painted monastic quarters seemingly growing out of the golden rock, a miraculous vision of human endeavor against a backdrop of stark, arid mountains. Access was deliberately challenging, with narrow, twisting paths and tunnels leading upward, a journey that symbolized both a physical and spiritual ascent. Within these cavernous halls, artisans created some of the most breathtaking art in all of Tibet. The walls of Trans-Saharan's temples are adorned with exquisite murals that have survived for centuries, preserved by the incredibly dry, thin air. These paintings depict a pantheon of Buddhist deities in rich, vibrant colors, their intricate details and serene expressions speaking to a highly refined artistic tradition. Gold leaf was applied to statues of the Buddha, and countless manuscripts were painstakingly copied and illuminated by monks in scriptoriums lit by butter lamps. This immense artistic output was fueled by the kingdom's strategic genius. Guge sat at a critical crossroads, controlling the lucrative trade routes between the heart of Tibet and the regions of Ladakh and Kashmir. Wealth from this trade, in the form of gold, wool, and salt, flowed into the kingdom, funding the construction of its temples and supporting a large monastic community. This economic power allowed Guge to become a major center for the translation of Buddhist texts and a key gateway for the transmission of Buddhism from India into Tibet. Yet for all its grandeur, the story of Guge ends in a haunting and mysterious silence. Sometime in the 17th century, this thriving kingdom vanished. The most prevalent tale is one of betrayal and siege, where an invading army from a neighboring kingdom exploited a promised diplomatic meeting to launch a brutal attack. Legends speak of a traitor showing the enemy a secret path to the top, leading to a massacre and the utter destruction of Guge. Other theories suggest economic collapse, perhaps from a shift in trade routes or internal strife that weakened the kingdom from within. The truth remains buried in the sands of time. What is left is a perfectly preserved time capsule. The dry, high-altitude climate acted as a natural museum, protecting the stunning murals, the empty palaces, and the silent temples from the decay that would have claimed them in a wetter environment. Walking through the ruins today, one can still see the everyday evidence of life abruptly interrupted. From grain stored in pots to meditation cells that still feel heavy with contemplation. The lost kingdom of Guge offers an unparalleled and poignant window into a sophisticated medieval Himalayan world, a civilization that mastered its environment to create a legacy of profound beauty, whose sudden fall from grace remains one of history's most compelling and unresolved enigmas. Picture the relentless might of the Assyrian war machine, an empire forged on the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, now turning its ambitious gaze toward the formidable, rebellious Zagros Mountains. This was not a landscape to be conquered through sheer force alone. The jagged peaks and deep valleys were home to fiercely independent peoples who used the terrain to their advantage, launching raids and resisting central authority. To tame this rugged frontier, the Assyrians engineered a brilliant and brutal solution, a network of fortified mountain strongholds planted like iron nails into the highest passes. These were not cities in the traditional sense, but instruments of pure imperial will. One of the most revealing examples is the settlement at Hassanlu, a site that provides a stunning window into this calculated strategy of high-altitude control. Life in these garrison towns was defined by a stark, militarized austerity. The soldiers and administrators stationed there lived a life far removed from the relative comforts of the lowland capitals like Nineveh or Asher. Their world was one of constant vigilance. The architecture itself spoke of perpetual readiness, featuring massively thick defensive walls, heavily fortified gateways, and towers positioned to command sweeping views of the valleys below. Every aspect of the settlement's design, from the strategic placement on a trade route to the narrow, easily defensible streets, served a single overarching purpose: to project the unambiguous power of the Assyrian king deep into territory that had never truly bowed to any outside ruler. Beyond their military role, these outposts functioned as critical economic engines for the empire. The mountains were not just a barrier, they were a treasure trove of resources. The Assyrians were master extractors, and these high-altitude garrisons became centralized hubs for mining precious metals like copper and tin, and for logging the dense forests for timber. This systematic plunder of mountain resources was then funneled back to the imperial heartland, fueling further expansion and enriching the state. The presence of the fortress ensured that this wealth flowed in only one direction, firmly into Assyrian hands, while also suppressing any local resistance that might disrupt the crucial supply chains. The discovery of the so-called Hassanlu Gold Bowl is a testament to the complex interactions that occurred even in these harsh settings. This magnificent artifact, found in the burned ruins of the citadel after a violent attack, suggests that local elites or allied rulers may have been incorporated into the Assyrian system, perhaps gifted such luxuries as tokens of allegiance or rewards for cooperation. It hints at a more nuanced relationship than simple domination, a delicate dance of coercion and diplomacy happening thousands of feet above sea level. These mountain strongholds ultimately reveal a sophisticated imperial logic. The Assyrians understood that to secure their vast domain, they could not just rule the map, they had to command the landscape. By planting their flags in the clouds, they transformed a wild and threatening frontier into a secured, productive, and integrated part of their empire, proving that the reach of an ancient superpower was limited only by its ambition and its ingenuity in overcoming nature's greatest obstacles. Now, let us journey from the fortified peaks of the Assyrian Empire to a completely different kind of isolation, one forged not by rock and willpower, but by wind and sea. Picture the fierce North Atlantic gales whipping across the Orkney Islands, a remote archipelago off the northern coast of Scotland. For over 4,000 years, a secret lay buried here beneath the shifting sands of the Bay of Scale, a secret that would only be revealed by the fury of a great storm in the 19th century. This is the story of Skara Brae, a prehistoric village that, while not perched on a mountain pass, captures the very essence of what we have been exploring, the profound human capacity to not only survive but to cultivate a rich, communal life in the face of a relentless and challenging environment. What the storm uncovered was nothing short of miraculous, a time capsule frozen in stone. Here was an entire Neolithic village, incredibly well preserved, its stone-built homes and their contents offering an intimate glimpse into daily life from over 5,000 years ago. The inhabitants of Skara Brae did not merely huddle in crude huts for shelter, they engineered a sophisticated subterranean community. Each family dwelling was sunk into a midden, which is essentially a large mound of household waste. This might sound unappealing, but it was a stroke of genius, as the packed organic material provided superb insulation against the bitter cold and the constant, biting wind. Stepping inside one of these homes is like walking into a blueprint for modern comfort, all carved from stone. The furniture was integral to the structure itself. Against the walls were stone box beds, likely filled with soft heather and animal skins for warmth. A central hearth provided heat and light for cooking. Perhaps most astonishing were the stone dressers, a focal point of the home where prized possessions would have been displayed. These were not crude cavemen. These were people with a sense of home, of place, and of domestic order. Even more impressively, the individual homes were linked together by a network of low, covered passageways. This design allowed the community to move between dwellings without having to brave the harsh outside elements, fostering a deeply interconnected social life even during the long, dark winter months. Their ingenuity extended beyond architecture. Evidence points to a society that had mastered its ecosystem. They were skilled farmers tending to cattle and sheep, and they were adept fishermen who harvested the bounty of the sea. But Skara Brae's story is not just one of survival, it is a story of culture and artistry. Among the artifacts unearthed were beautifully crafted necklaces made from animal teeth and bone, and polished stone objects with intricate, mysterious carvings featuring geometric patterns. These were not essential tools for survival. They were expressions of identity, belief, and aesthetic pleasure. They prove that even in a landscape that demanded constant attention to the basics of life, the human spirit still reached for something more, for beauty and symbolic meaning. So why include a coastal village in our exploration of mountain pass settlements? Because Skara Brae is a powerful parallel narrative. It demonstrates that the drive to innovate and build resilient communities is a universal human trait, not confined to any single geography. The challenges were different. The mountains provided strategic defense and control over trade routes. while the Orkney Islands offered maritime resources and isolation from mainland conflicts. Yet the human response was strikingly similar, a combination of brilliant practical adaptation and the nurturing of a rich, cohesive social world. Skara Brae stands as a monumental reminder that whether in the thin air of high peaks or the salt spray of a distant shore, our ancestors consistently displayed an extraordinary ability to turn a harsh environment into a place they could proudly call home. Imagine a horizon dotted with surreal, towering rock formations that look less like geology and more like something from a dream. This is Cappadocia, a region in central Turkey where the very earth seems to have conspired with human history to create a landscape of breathtaking wonder. But the true marvel here is not just what nature sculpted from the soft volcanic tuff, but what humans over millennia carved out from within it. This is the story of the cave cities, a breathtaking network of subterranean and cliffside settlements so extensive and sophisticated they defy belief, representing one of the most ambitious architectural projects in human history. The story begins not with construction, but with erosion. Millions of years ago, volcanic eruptions blanketed the area with a thick layer of ash, which hardened into a soft, malleable rock called tuff. Wind and water then went to work, carving the iconic ferry chimneys and deep valleys that define the region today. Ancient peoples looked at these pliable stone pillars and saw not just a curious landscape, but an opportunity. They realized they could easily carve into this rock, creating not just simple caves, but entire, intricate cities that burrowed deep underground or perched high on cliff faces. This was not a short-term endeavor, but a project that spanned centuries, evolving from the time of the Hittites through the Roman era and into the Byzantine period, with each generation adding new layers, new tunnels, and new rooms to the ever-expanding complex. To call these places mere villages is a profound understatement. Sites like Derinkuyu and Kamakli are multi-level metropolises that plunge up to 18 stories deep into the earth. They were meticulously engineered for long-term survival. These were fully functional cities, complete with living quarters, sprawling kitchens with stone hearths, impressive churches adorned with frescoes, storerooms for vast quantities of food, stables for livestock, wine and oil presses, and even communal spaces for gatherings. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend, with estimates suggesting that the largest of these underground cities could have sheltered up to 20,000 people along with their essential supplies. This was a civilization that literally turned inward, creating a hidden world of astonishing complexity. The primary driver for this monumental effort was without a doubt defense. Cappadocia sat at a volatile crossroads of empires, frequently threatened by invading armies. When scouts spotted an approaching force, the entire regional population could vanish from sight within hours. They would retreat underground, sealing themselves in behind massive, rolling stone doors that looked just like the surrounding rock wall, making entrances virtually undetectable from the outside. But a city of thousands cannot simply be sealed in a tomb, and this is where the engineering genius truly shines. The inhabitants solved the critical problems of air and water with brilliant simplicity. A vast network of meticulously planned ventilation shafts, sometimes stretching for miles, ensured a constant supply of fresh air to even the deepest levels. They dug deep wells to access underground water sources, completely independent of rivers or surface supplies. This self-sufficiency allowed communities to survive in complete secrecy for months at a time, long after any invading army had given up and moved on. Beyond sheer survival, these caves became sanctuaries for culture and faith. During the early centuries of Christianity, when followers faced brutal persecution under the Roman Empire, Cappadocia's hidden valleys and subterranean refuges became a stronghold. Monks and entire communities carved hundreds of churches and monasteries into the rock, adorning them with beautiful, intricate paintings that told biblical stories. In the absolute silence and safety of these underground chapels, often hidden behind disguised entrances, they could worship in peace. This preservation of faith and art through centuries of turmoil allowed a rich cultural identity to flourish untouched by the conflicts raging on the surface above. The cave cities of Cappadocia stand as a timeless testament to human resilience, proving that sometimes the most powerful way to endure and protect what you hold dear is not to build walls to keep others out, but to creatively disappear within the very earth itself. Picture a line of camels 100 strong, moving like a slow, living river through a narrow mountain pass. Their backs are heavy with slabs of precious salt, mined from the desert and destined for markets hundreds of miles away. This was the lifeblood of Trans-Saharan trade for centuries, a flow of wealth and goods that connected entire continents. And standing sentinel over these vital arteries, high in the rugged passes of the Atlas Mountains, were the Khazars, the formidable fortified villages that served as guardians, way stations, and crucibles of culture. These were not isolated outposts of desperation, but thriving, strategic hubs built with ingenious architecture to master one of the world's most demanding landscapes. The very structure of a Khazar tells a story of adaptation and defense. Constructed from the earth itself, using a technique called rammed earth or pisse, these buildings blend seamlessly into the reddish-orange hues of the mountain environment. High, windowless outer walls faced the outside world, presenting a formidable, unified barrier to any potential raiders looking to plunder the rich caravans. Inside, the architecture was a maze of narrow, shaded alleys designed to confuse outsiders and provide cool respite from the blistering sun. Lookout towers perched at strategic points, offering sweeping views of the approach routes, allowing the inhabitants to see trouble long before it arrived. One of the most stunning examples is 8 Ben Haddou in Morocco, an UNESCO World Heritage Site that appears almost to have grown organically from the cliffside it rests upon. Its multi-storied earthen buildings, some decorated with striking geometric patterns, climb the hill towards a communal granary at its summit, a symbol of shared security and prosperity. Life within these walls was a unique blend of the practical and the cultural. The communities that called the Khazars home were primarily Berber, the indigenous people of North Africa. Theirs was a culture forged in the mountains and deserts, but endlessly enriched by the constant flow of people and ideas that the trade routes brought to their doorstep. A Khazar was a bustling microcosm of the Trans-Saharan exchange. Within its protective walls, traders from sub-Saharan Africa would meet merchants from the Mediterranean coast. They would negotiate not just for salt, but for gold, ivory, textiles, spices, and enslaved people. Languages mingled in the market squares, and religious beliefs were shared and sometimes syncretized. This constant interaction made the Khazars vibrant cultural melting pots, where ancient Berber traditions absorbed influences from Arab, African, and European cultures, creating a distinctive and enduring identity. The economic role of these settlements cannot be overstated. They were the essential lifelines that made the immense journey across the Sahara possible. A caravan leaving the great trading cities like Timbuktu might travel for weeks before reaching the first Khazar in the Atlas foothills. Here, exhausted men and animals could finally find safety, rest, clean water, and repairs for their gear. The Khazar provided a secure place to conduct business, negotiate new deals, and get accurate information about the conditions on the trail ahead. Without these fortified waypoints, the immense risks and costs of the Trans-Saharan trade would have been insurmountable. They were the linchpins in an economic network that fueled empires, ensuring that wealth from the African interior could reach the wider world, and that goods from across the Mediterranean could travel deep into the continent. The Kesars of the Atlas Mountains stand as a powerful testament to human ingenuity in commerce and community, proving that even in the most rugged terrain, we will always find a way to connect, trade, and build civilizations that stand the test of time. Now we journey to the highlands of Ethiopia, a vast and rugged landscape of volcanic peaks and elevated plateaus that has been called the roof of Africa. Here, scattered across remote mountain passes, lie some of the continent's most captivating and least understood archaeological treasures. Far from the famous pyramids of the Nile, these sites tell a different story of African civilization, one written not in grand tombs but in enigmatic fields of towering, carved stones. The most renowned of these is Tia, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where over 40 megaliths stand in solemn rows. But Tia is merely the most visible chapter. Countless other stellar fields and settlement ruins are dotted across the highlands, many still shrouded in dense vegetation and mystery, waiting to reveal their secrets. These are not random collections of rock. Each stone is a monument meticulously carved from solid volcanic rock and transported, without the use of the wheel or draft animals, to its final resting place. The engineering feat alone is staggering. Imagine the coordinated effort required to quarry, shape, and erect a monolith standing over 20 feet tall and weighing several tons on these windswept highland plateaus. The stones themselves are canvases of ancient symbolism, covered in carvings that have stubbornly resisted complete decipherment. The most common motifs are enigmatic shapes that resemble swords or blades, along with subtle circles and other abstract signs. Archaeologists widely believe these stelae functioned as grave markers for an elite warrior class or powerful chieftains, with the symbols representing the status and achievements of the individual buried beneath. However, the true meaning of this symbolic language remains one of archaeology's compelling puzzles, a silent code from a forgotten kingdom. The settlements that erected these megaliths were the centers of sophisticated pre-Aksumite cultures, powerful states that flourished in the region before the rise of the famous Aksumite Empire. Their strategic position in the highlands was no accident. The elevated terrain offered rich volcanic soil that was ideal for agriculture, allowing for the cultivation of crops that could support a dense and stratified society. Furthermore, these plateaus and passes placed them at a crucial crossroads for commerce. They were perfectly positioned to control and benefit from trade routes that stretched from the interior of Africa to the Red Sea coast, where they would have engaged with merchants from southern Arabia and beyond, exchanging luxury goods, ideas, and technologies. This was not an isolated culture but a connected and influential player in the ancient world. The discovery and ongoing study of these sites actively rewrite a long-held historical narrative. For centuries, the story of complex, monumental civilization in Africa was almost exclusively focused on the Nile Valley, on Egypt and Nubia. The Ethiopian highland megaliths shatter that narrow view. They provide undeniable proof that powerful, organized, and artistically sophisticated societies arose independently in the heart of the continent's rugged interior. They developed their own unique traditions of statecraft, art, and monument building, utterly disconnected from the influence of the pharaohs. This revelation elevates our understanding of African history, painting a picture of a continent with multiple, simultaneous cradles of civilization, each adapting to and mastering their own distinct and challenging environment. The silent, towering stones of the highlands are a powerful testament to this lost chapter of human achievement. While the world rightly marvels at the sun-drenched terraces of Machu Picchu, the true genius of the Inca becomes apparent only when we shift our gaze to the surrounding peaks and realize it was never meant to stand alone. Just a few hours' journey along the ancient Inca Trail, hidden amidst the dense cloud forest on a ridge opposite the famous citadel, lies the quieter yet equally profound settlement of Lactapata. Its name, meaning high town in Quechua, perfectly describes its strategic and spiritual position, overseeing the entire sacred basin. This was not a random outpost, but a meticulously placed piece in a grand celestial and terrestrial puzzle engineered by the Inca. The architecture here was designed with a purpose that reached for the heavens. Key structures align with breathtaking precision to the rising sun during the June solstice, when its first rays would blaze directly over the distant pinnacle of Machu Picchu itself. This was no coincidence. It was a deliberate act of astronomical alignment, transforming Lactapata into a giant stone observatory and a ceremonial gateway. For the Inca, who worshipped the sun god Inti, this precise celestial event would have been a moment of immense power and spiritual significance, a divine connection choreographed in stone and light. Beyond its role as a sacred calendar, Lactapata served vital practical functions within the empire's intricate network. Its elevated vantage point offered a commanding, unobstructed view of the Urubamba River Valley snaking thousands of feet below, a natural highway connecting a chain of important Inca sites. This made it an ideal strategic lookout, a place from which sentinels could monitor movement and send signals across vast distances. Furthermore, for pilgrims and official travelers making the arduous multi-day trek to Machu Picchu, Lactapata would have been a welcome sanctuary. Excavations suggest the presence of residential buildings and storehouses, indicating it was a vital way station where weary travelers could rest, resupply, and prepare themselves spiritually before the final ascent to the main citadel. It was both a physical and a psychological threshold, a place to shed the mundane world before entering the most sacred space in the Inca realm. The existence of Lactapata fundamentally changes our understanding of Machu Picchu. It reveals that the iconic site was not an isolated wonder but the brilliant centerpiece of an interconnected sacred landscape. The Incas did not simply build structures on mountains. They wove the mountains themselves into the fabric of their cosmology, administration, and daily life. Each settlement, each pass, each terraced field was a deliberate node in a vast and living network. Lactapata was one such node, a crucial link that connected the earthly realm to the celestial, the practical needs of the empire to its spiritual heart. It shows us that the Inca vision was one of harmonious integration, where architecture, astronomy, and the raw power of the natural world were fused into a single, unified expression of power and belief. This sophisticated planning rewrites our perception of ancient engineering, proving their mastery was not just over stone, but over the very concepts of space, time, and sacred geography. High on the sun-baked cliffs of what is now Colorado, an entire civilization literally carved its place in history. The ancestral Pueblones, creators of the breathtaking cliff palace at Mesa Verde, did not just find shelter in the rock. They engineered a masterpiece of urban planning in one of the most unlikely settings imaginable. Imagine a village not built on the ground, but within the earth itself, a sprawling complex of over 150 rooms and 24 kivas tucked securely into a massive natural alcove. This was not a simple collection of homes. It was a vertical city with multi-story towers and plazas that echoed the communal life of its people. The choice of a south-facing cliff was a stroke of genius, harnessing the winter sun to warm the stone walls while providing shade from the intense summer heat, a perfect natural climate control system that required no technology other than profound environmental understanding. Getting home was a daily act of daring and security. The primary access points were not roads or paths in the conventional sense, but a series of narrow cracks in the cliff face, scaled using hand and toe holds painstakingly pecked into the sandstone. For other entryways, the residents used tall, removable ladders. One swift pull upwards, and the entire community became an impregnable fortress, isolated from any threat below. This formidable defense system allowed the community to thrive, but its architecture reveals a society focused on more than just survival. The presence of so many kivas, which were circular, underground chambers used for religious ceremonies and political meetings, points to a rich and complex spiritual life. These were the heart of the community, places where social bonds were strengthened, traditions were passed down, and a shared identity was forged against the stunning backdrop of the mesa. The scale of their achievement becomes even more remarkable when you consider their connections to the wider world. Artifacts discovered at Mesa Verde tell a story of astonishing reach. They traded for turquoise from hundreds of miles away in present-day New Mexico, seashells from the Pacific coast, and macaw feathers from as far south as central Mexico. This was not an isolated, insular community huddled in a cave, but a sophisticated node in a continent-spanning network of exchange, proving that even a seemingly remote cliff dwelling was plugged into the pulse of ancient North America. And then, around the end of the 13th century, they left. The Great Migration from these stunning homes remains one of North America's most compelling mysteries, with theories ranging from prolonged drought to social upheaval or resource depletion. Their departure was not an end but a transition, a movement to new lands where their descendants, the Pueblo people, continue to honor their legacy. The silent, empty rooms of Cliff Palace stand not as a monument to abandonment, but as a powerful, enduring testament to Native American ingenuity, a timeless reminder of a people who turned a sheer cliff wall into a thriving home. Perched at a breathtaking altitude where the air itself feels thin and ancient, the town of Leh commands the Indus Valley from its rocky throne. For more than a millennia, this has been more than just a settlement. It has been a vital, throbbing heart of exchange. Imagine the scene centuries ago, a constant flow of caravans snaking through the high mountain passes. Laden with precious goods, these traders created a living bridge between the vastly different worlds of Tibet, Kashmir, and the sprawling empires of Central Asia. Leh was the essential oasis, the one safe harbor where weary travelers could find rest, barter their wares, and exchange not just silk and spices, but ideas, languages, and faiths. This constant stream of humanity bestowed upon Leh a cosmopolitan spirit that still lingers in its bustling market streets, a timeless reminder of its role as a universal crossroads. Dominating the skyline, the magnificent Leh Palace stands as a silent, stone sentinel to this rich history. Constructed in the 17th century and modeled after the iconic Potala Palace in Lhasa, its 9 stories rise from the mountainside like a natural extension of the rock itself. While today it stands in beautiful ruins, its crumbling grandeur perfectly symbolizes the enduring legacy of the Namgyal dynasty that once ruled from within its walls. The palace was not merely a royal residence, it was the very embodiment of power, culture, and administrative control, a deliberate statement of sophistication and sovereignty carved into the roof of the world. Its strategic vantage point offered unrivaled views of the entire valley, allowing its kings to survey both their domain and the approaching trade routes that were the kingdom's lifeline. The true miracle of Leh, however, lies not in its stones but in its people. The Ladakhi Buddhists who call this place home engineered a culture of profound resilience, a masterpiece of adaptation to a high-altitude desert. In a landscape where water is life itself, they developed a sophisticated system of channels to divert the precious glacial meltwater from the towering peaks to their fields. Their entire agricultural calendar, and by extension their social and religious life, became a delicate dance with the seasons, entirely dependent on the slow, eternal thaw of the ice. This deep, symbiotic relationship with their environment shaped a world centered on community, sustainability, and a quiet, enduring patience. At the core of this worldview are the monasteries or gampas that dot the hills surrounding Leh. These are not mere places of worship, they are the fortified citadels of knowledge and art that have safeguarded Ladakhi identity for centuries. Within their whitewashed walls and golden-roofed temples, generations of monks have preserved ancient scriptures, perfected the intricate art of Thangka painting, and practiced sacred dances that tell the stories of Buddhist deities. Monasteries like Hemis, Thixi, and She became renowned centers of learning, attracting scholars and pilgrims from across the Himalayas. They served as the cultural engines of the region, ensuring that even as empires rose and fell and trade routes shifted, the unique spiritual and artistic flame of Ladakh continued to burn brightly against the vast, stark beauty of the mountains, proving that the most valuable cargo traveling through these high passes was often not material but profoundly spiritual. Far to the north, where the Ural Mountains carve a rugged border between the continents of Europe and Asia, an entirely different kind of high-altitude ingenuity was taking root. This was not a story of spiritual retreat or trade monopoly, but of fire, earth, and metal. The Urals are a treasure chest of mineral wealth, and as early as the Bronze Age, some of the world's first industrialists were drawn to its riches. They did not just visit to extract resources, they built entire worlds on the mountain passes leading to the mines. Their settlements were fortresses of innovation, and they would fundamentally reshape the course of human technology in ways that echo down to us today. The most extraordinary example of this is the site of Archaeology. Discovered in the late 20th century, Archaeology is often called Russia's Stonehenge, but that comparison hardly does it justice. It was a complete, circular fortified town, meticulously planned with two concentric walls and a central plaza, all oriented with astonishing precision to celestial events. Every house opened onto an inner circular street and had its own furnace and workshop, directly connected to a sophisticated drainage and water supply system. This was not a haphazard collection of huts, it was a geometrically perfect community, a marvel of urban planning constructed over 3,000 years ago on the high steppe. The people who built it were part of what archaeologists call the Sintashta culture, a society whose technological prowess seems almost unbelievable for its time. The Sintashta people were the high-tech pioneers of the Bronze Age. Their settlements were not just homes, they were the earliest known centers for intensive and advanced metallurgy. Within those circular walls, smelters worked with copper and tin to create bronze, fueling a technological revolution. But their most profound innovation was happening nearby, in workshops that would change warfare and transport forever. The Sintashta culture is credited with developing some of the very first spoked-wheel chariots. This was a transformative invention, the fastest and most maneuverable military vehicle the world had ever seen. The high-altitude environment was key to their success, providing not only the raw materials like copper and timber, but also the strategic seclusion needed to develop and protect their valuable secrets. This combination of metallurgy and mobility gave the Sintashta and their descendants an unparalleled advantage. Their innovations did not stay locked in the Ural passes, they spread like wildfire across the Eurasian landmass. The chariot technology, in particular, became a coveted asset, eventually reaching the great empires of the ancient Near East and fundamentally altering the nature of conquest and kingship. These mountain settlements were therefore not remote outposts on the edge of civilization. They were its dynamic core, the very cradle of technologies that would bind continents together. They force us to completely rewrite the story of the Bronze Age, revealing that some of history's most pivotal breakthroughs were forged not in the crowded river valleys, but in the thin, crisp air of strategic mountain passes, by people who saw the heights not as a barrier, but as a platform for reaching the future. Far from the industrial clamor of the Urals, another civilization was mastering the mountains in a way that blended the earthly and the divine into an inseparable whole. In the heart of Java, the breathtaking Hindu temple complex of Prambanan rises from the fertile plains, its stone spires piercing the sky in a dramatic silhouette. But to understand this majestic sight, one must lift their gaze from the manicured lawns and look toward the horizon, where the brooding, smoke-tinged peak of Mount Merapi looms. The story of Prambanan is not a solitary one. It is a tale of two realms, a profound and sacred partnership between the lowlands and the highlands that defined an entire kingdom. The plains provided the stage, but the volcanoes wrote the script, offering both the literal sustenance and the spiritual authority that made such grandeur possible. The economic foundation of the Mataram kingdom, the power behind Prambanan, was entirely dependent on the generosity of these volcanic slopes. While the plains were flat and easier to settle, it was the mineral-rich soil, continuously renewed by eruptions from mountains like Merapi and Merbabu, that created phenomenally productive farmland. This agricultural surplus funded the kingdom's ambitious building projects and supported the priests, artists, and laborers who dedicated their lives to constructing stone prayers to the gods. Without the fertile gift of the highlands, the lowlands would have remained a modest settlement, never flourishing into a cultural and political center capable of erecting one of Southeast Asia's most magnificent temple complexes. The mountains were the silent, indispensable partners in this endeavor, the source of the kingdom's wealth and physical well-being. Yet the connection ran infinitely deeper than mere economics. In the Hindu-Buddhist cosmology embraced by the Mataram, mountains were not just geological features, they were the absolute axis of the universe, the sacred abode of the gods. Mount Merapi, an active and powerful volcano, was seen as a manifestation of divine power, a place where the spiritual and physical worlds violently and awesomely intersected. To merely build a temple on the plains was not enough. The kingdom needed to physically connect with this divine source. This led to the establishment of smaller temple complexes, hermitages, and meditation caves directly on the flanks of the sacred volcanoes. These high-altitude sanctuaries were not for the general public. They were reserved for priests and royalty seeking spiritual purification, deeper knowledge, and direct communion with the deities believed to reside in the volcanic fires. This created a remarkable sacred geography, a ritual landscape that linked the plains and the peaks in a continuous spiritual circuit. A pilgrim or a king would not have seen Prambanan and Mount Merapi as separate entities. They were 2 points on a single sacred continuum. The journey from the grand, communal temples of the lowlands to the secluded, austere hermitages of the highlands was a metaphorical ascent, moving closer to the ultimate source of power and creation. The architecture itself reflected this, with the towering main shrine of Prambanan, dedicated to Shiva, designed as a symbolic representation of the mythical Mount Meru, the center of all cosmic realms. The kingdom was effectively building a model of its universe, with the real, tangible Mount Merapi serving as the archetype and anchor for the entire cosmological system. This symbiotic relationship forces us to completely reimagine the role of mountain settlements. They were not remote outliers or defensive afterthoughts. In the case of the Mataram kingdom, the highlands were the spiritual core, the beating heart that gave meaning and power to the political body on the plains. The smaller settlements on the volcanic slopes were the keepers of that sacred flame, the interface between the human realm and the divine. They show us that ancient civilizations did not merely exploit their mountainous hinterlands for resources. They integrated them into the very fabric of their identity, viewing them as the ultimate source of both their material wealth and their spiritual authority, a dual blessing from the gods that flowed directly from the slopes of the sacred peaks. Rising from the flat plains of central Sri Lanka with the abrupt, staggering presence of a stone giant, the rock fortress of Sigiriya is a monument to one man's brilliant, paranoid ambition. This is not a settlement that grew organically over centuries, but one that was forcibly willed into existence at the command of a king clinging to power. In the 5th century, after seizing the throne from his father in a violent coup, King Kasyapa faced a kingdom that viewed him as a usurper. His solution was not to win hearts and minds in the established capital, but to literally rise above the problem. He chose a 200-meter-high rock monolith, a geological marvel that had been used for centuries as a monastery, and transformed it into an unassailable royal citadel, a statement of defiance carved into the very sky. The journey to the summit was a calculated psychological and physical ordeal, a display of the king's absolute power. It began in a series of breathtaking water gardens at the base, among the oldest landscaped gardens in the world. Here, visitors and subjects would wander through symmetrically laid pools, fountains, and islands, a display of serene control and opulence that contrasted sharply with the intimidating rock above. The ascent then led up a dizzying staircase clinging to the sheer rock face. Partway up, a sheltered gallery housed the now famous frescoes of the Celestial Maidens, their vibrant colors and enigmatic smiles a glimpse into a refined courtly culture existing high above the world. These paintings were not mere decoration, they were a promise of the beauty and luxury that awaited at the pinnacle, a reward for the arduous climb. The final approach was designed to be the most awe-inspiring. The pathway to the summit passed through the massive outstretched paws of a colossal brick and plaster lion, its head long since collapsed into ruin. To enter the king's domain, one had to walk directly into the mouth of the beast, a powerful symbol of the king's authority and the dangerous path to his audience. The summit itself was a marvel of engineering. Despite the limited space, Kasyapa's builders created a perfectly level palace complex with royal bathing pools, throne rooms, and residences, all supplied with water by a complex system of cisterns carved directly into the rock that collected and stored monsoon rains. Life at the top was a bizarre mix of lavish luxury and profound isolation, a gilded cage perched on the edge of the sky. Sigiriya's story is a profound study in contradictions. It stands as one of history's most brilliant feats of urban planning and hydraulic engineering, a self-contained ecosystem in the clouds, yet its entire existence was fueled by fear, a desperate bid for security that traded community for solitude. The king's grand experiment was as short-lived as it was spectacular. After ruling from his rock for a mere 18 years, Kasyapa was defeated in battle, and the capital was abandoned, returning to the monks who had first inhabited its caves. Sigiriya thus endures not as a testament to a lasting dynasty, but as a unique and fleeting moment where absolute paranoia, staggering wealth, and unparalleled artistic vision converge to create something truly unforgettable, a solitary masterpiece of defensive architecture that has outlasted the very kingdom it was built to protect. Imagine a bustling crossroads not of stone and steel, but of sand and sky, where the only sounds are the whisper of the wind and the distant jingle of camel bells. Far from the lush river valleys we often associate with ancient civilizations, the Gobi Desert presents a different kind of stage for human drama. This immense sea of aridity is ringed by the rugged peaks of the Altai Mountains, and hidden within the passes of these high, dry ranges are the skeletons of forgotten cities. These were not just way stations but vital, pulsating hubs on the northern branches of the Silk Road, and their story is one of fragile existence in a world of extremes. The most legendary of these lost cities is Kara Koto, the Black City. Founded by the Tangut people of the Western Xia dynasty, it was a carefully engineered oasis. Its very existence was a declaration of defiance against the desert. The Tangut constructed elaborate systems of canals to divert water from a river that flowed from the nearby mountains, transforming a patch of the barren landscape into a fertile haven. They surrounded their creation with massive, imposing walls of rammed earth, some sections still standing over 30 feet tall today, a testament to their need for security in a land where both nature and mankind could be equally merciless. Within those walls thrived a sophisticated urban center, a place where artisans crafted beautiful Buddhist art, scribes penned texts in the unique Tangut script, and traders haggled over goods from across the known world. Kara Koto's fate, however, was tied to the volatile politics of the steppe. When the Mongol Empire rose to power under Genghis Khan, the city was besieged and ultimately absorbed into the vast Mongol web of control. Ironically, under Mongol rule, Kara Koto found a new purpose, becoming a strategic garrison town protecting the empire's western flank. But the same walls that had once defended it eventually became its tomb. Legend tells of a Mongol general laying siege to the city and diverting the very river that gave it life, fatally cutting off its water supply. Whether by this dramatic act or a slower process of climatic change and shifting trade routes, Kara Koto was eventually abandoned, left to the unending patience of the desert sands. For centuries, it remained a ghost city, a myth whispered about by nomadic herdsmen. Its rediscovery in the early 20th century by explorers like Pyotr Kozlov was a moment of unparalleled archaeological excitement. The incredibly dry air of the go-by had acted as a perfect preservative. Kozlov unearthed a treasure trove of history not in gold or jewels but in paper and ink. He found a library of over 2,000 books, manuscripts, and scrolls, a literary time capsule sealed for centuries. These texts, written in Tangut, Chinese, and other languages, revealed the rich intellectual and spiritual life of the city, detailing Buddhist philosophies, legal codes, and poetic works, offering a voice to a civilization that had been completely erased from common memory. The story of Kara Koto and the other lost settlements of the Go-by Altai is a powerful lesson in symbiotic relationships. These high-altitude desert cities could not exist in a vacuum. Their survival was a precarious dance with the nomadic empires that roamed the surrounding plains. The sedentary city dwellers provided goods, metalwork, and a fixed market for the nomads' animals and animal products. In return, the powerful nomadic confederacies offered protection and ensured the safe passage of caravans that were the city's economic lifeblood. It was a fragile understanding, a balance of power that, when maintained, created flourishing cultural crossroads, but when broken, could lead to complete and utter oblivion. These cities were not isolated fortresses but integral, if delicate, threads in the vast tapestry of Eurasian history. Now, let us shift our gaze from the sun-baked deserts of the Go-by to the cool, mist-shrouded peaks of the European Alps. Here, amidst the rocky crags and high meadows, archaeologists have uncovered a different kind of high-altitude mystery, one that speaks not of permanent homes, but of profound spiritual journeys. Scattered across some of the most challenging mountain passes, from sites like the Lurchen Pass in Switzerland to the Col de Clapier between France and Italy, are places known as pass sanctuaries. These were not villages or forts. You would not find families living here year-round. Instead, these were sacred spaces, open-air altars perched at the roof of the world, where Bronze Age travelers some 3,000 years ago felt compelled to stop and make an offering. Imagine a metalworker, his muscles aching from the climb, pausing at a windswept col, a low point between two towering peaks. The air is thin, the path ahead is treacherous, and the weather can turn in an instant. In his pack, he carries not just trade goods, but a small, carefully crafted bronze figurine, perhaps a simple human form or a representation of an animal. He approaches a natural rock formation that serves as a shrine and gently places his offering there, alongside dozens of others left by previous travelers. This was not a casual gesture. These objects, which also included finely made daggers, axe heads, and jewelry, were valuable. To leave them behind was a significant personal sacrifice, a deliberate act of giving something precious to gain something even more vital, safe passage. This practice reveals a worldview where the mountains were far more than mere physical obstacles. For these ancient people, the high passes were liminal zones, thresholds between one world and the next. Crossing them was not just a geographical transition from one valley to another, but a spiritual voyage. They were leaving the known, familiar territory of their own community and entering a space that belonged to the powerful and often capricious deities of the mountains. The howling wind was not just wind, it was a voice. The sudden avalanche was not just a natural disaster, it was a sign of displeasure. By making an offering, the traveler was essentially paying respect, asking for permission to cross, and seeking the protection of the forces that ruled this majestic and dangerous realm. The sheer variety of artifacts found at these sites tells a story of widespread and shared belief. Objects come from different regions and cultural groups, indicating that this spiritual practice was a common language understood by all who dared to traverse the Alps. A trader from the north and a herdsman from the south might not speak the same tongue, but they both recognized the power of the place and participated in the same ritual. This created a unique cultural landscape, a network of faith etched into the very rock of the mountains. The physical challenge of the ascent was therefore inextricably linked to a spiritual preparation. The journey was as much an internal, psychological undertaking as it was an external, physical one. What these alpine sanctuaries teach us is a profound truth about the human spirit. Our ancestors did not simply conquer harsh environments through brute force and technological innovation alone. They also sought to understand them, to negotiate with them, and to find a place within them through ritual and belief. The relationship with high altitudes was a partnership, a conversation between people and the powerful, animate world they inhabited. It was an acknowledgement that some forces are greater than ourselves, and that sometimes the most powerful tool for survival is not a stronger weapon, but a humble offering left on a stone altar under the vast and watchful sky. But our final journey takes us from the cool, spiritual heights of the Alps to the lush, vibrant tropics. Here, an entire civilization did not just build on the mountains, they sculpted the very mountains themselves into a masterpiece of survival and beauty. For over 2,000 years, the Ifugao people of the Philippine Cordilleras have engaged in a continuous act of creation, carving the steep slopes of northern Luzon into a staggering landscape of emerald green steppes. These are the Ifugao rice terraces, often called the eighth wonder of the world, and they represent perhaps the most harmonious and enduring relationship between humans and a high-altitude environment ever achieved. This is not a relic of a lost past, but a living, breathing cultural landscape where ancient traditions continue to feed and sustain a community. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend until you see it. Imagine an entire mountain range with peaks soaring to nearly 5,000 feet, transformed into a vast staircase for giants. The terraces cascade down the slopes, following every contour of the land, their stone and mud walls holding back pools of water that shimmer in the sun like a mosaic of mirrors. The total length of these terraces, if placed end to end, would stretch for over 12,000 miles, a distance that could wrap around nearly half the planet. This was not accomplished with heavy machinery, but through the patient, generational work of hand, using only simple wooden tools and an immense collective will. Each stone was placed, each wall was packed by people who understood that their survival depended on the mountain's generosity. What makes this settlement truly remarkable is its complete integration. The terraces are not separate from the village, they are the village. Stilted houses built from wood and thatch are nestled amongst the paddies or perched on stable outcrops. The community's social structure, its daily rhythms, its very identity, are all organized around the life cycle of the rice. This is governed by a complex and incredibly democratic system of communal water management. A network of bamboo pipes and canals, meticulously maintained, channels water from the misty forests at the mountaintops down through every single terrace in a carefully orchestrated flow. This system is managed by a council of elders, ensuring that water, the most precious resource, is shared fairly among all families. It is a society built on the principles of cooperation and mutual obligation, where every individual has a stake in the collective success. Underpinning this entire endeavor is a profound spiritual connection to the land. The Ifugao worldview is animistic, believing that spirits inhabit the forests, the rocks, and the water sources. Rice is not merely a crop, it is a sacred gift. Planting and harvesting are accompanied by rituals and offerings to appease these spirits and ensure a bountiful yield. This deep reverence translates into a form of conservation ethics that is centuries ahead of its time. The surrounding woodlands are protected as watersheds, understood to be the vital source of the irrigation system. Every element of the ecosystem, from the tallest tree to the smallest earthworm in the paddy soil, is respected as part of a delicate, interconnected whole. The Ifugao did not conquer their mountain home, they entered into a symbiotic partnership with it. This living monument stands as a powerful counterpoint to the notion of high-altitude survival as a bleak, desperate struggle. It is a testament to what humanity can achieve through patience, profound ecological understanding, and unwavering community spirit. The Ifugao rice terraces are not a settlement that simply exists in a tough environment. They are a civilization that blossomed because of it, rewriting the rules of possibility and showing the world that a mountain is not an obstacle, but a canvas. Looking back across this incredible journey, from the Andes to the Himalayas and everywhere in between, a profound truth becomes clear. These 26 settlements are not just isolated wonders. They are individual verses in a single, global epic of human ingenuity. Despite being separated by vast oceans and millennia, they speak to us with one voice about our shared instincts for survival, meaning, and connection. The most immediate thread tying these communities together is the universal quest for security. Whether it was the Inca building Machu Picchu on a razor-backed ridge or the Assyrians fortifying a pass in the Zagros Mountains, the logic was the same. Height provided a natural defense, a formidable barrier against invading armies or rival tribes. This was not about hiding, but about controlling the high ground, turning a geographical challenge into a strategic advantage that allowed their cultures to flourish in peace. Yet, security was only the beginning. What truly allowed these societies to thrive was their breathtaking capacity for adaptation. They did not simply endure their harsh environments, they mastered them through brilliant innovation. We see this in the sophisticated water management of the Khotan outposts, with their underground Corrèze canals, and in the passive solar design of the cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde. We see it in the raised field agriculture of Tiwanaku that turned a cold Altiplano into a breadbasket, and of course, in the world-changing terracing of the Philippine Cordilleras. This was not mere subsistence, it was a deep, intimate conversation with nature, a process of learning the land's secrets and collaborating with it to create abundance. Their architectural genius, from the cave cities of Cappadocia to the stonework of Kuelap, shows a mastery of materials and an understanding of structural engineering that still inspires awe today. And perhaps most surprisingly, these seemingly remote communities were often anything but isolated. They were vital hubs in sprawling networks of exchange. The stone fortress of Tashkurgan pulsed with the energy of Silk Road caravans, a melting pot of languages, religions, and goods. The Kesars of the Atlas Mountains guarded the lifeblood of Trans-Saharan trade. Even a spiritual retreat like Meteora was connected to the wider Orthodox Christian world. This interconnectedness shatters the romantic myth of the isolated mountain hermit. These were dynamic places where ideas flowed as freely as goods, where a trader from a distant land could share stories and technologies that would then be adapted for life at high altitude, proving that remoteness is not the same as irrelevance. In fact, their locations made them crucial. Underpinning all of this, from the astronomical alignments of Chankillo to the sacred caves of Mustang, was a powerful spiritual current. The thin air of the heights was not just physically exhilarating, it was spiritually charged. Ancient peoples universally saw mountains as the dwelling places of gods, as bridges between the earthly and the divine. Building a community, there was a sacred act, an attempt to be closer to the celestial realm. This spiritual connection fostered a profound respect for the natural world, an understanding that they were part of an ecosystem, not its masters. This reverence is what ensured the sustainability of their practices for centuries, a lesson in balance that feels more urgent than ever in our modern world. So what does this grand tapestry tell us? It reveals a universal blueprint for human resilience. When faced with the challenge of the heights, cultures across time and space responded with a predictable yet magnificent pattern. They sought security, they innovated brilliantly to adapt, they connected with wider worlds, and they searched for deeper meaning. This pattern speaks to something fundamental in the human spirit, an irrepressible drive to not only survive but to build, to create community, and to find our place in the cosmos, no matter how sheer the cliff face or how thin the air. These 26 settlements are not ancient anomalies. They are a mirror reflecting the very best of our collective potential for perseverance and wonder.